Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christina Seaborn, and I'm a biotech analyst at Piper Jaffray. I'm pleased to introduce our next company, Advanced Cell Technology, and here to provide an update is Ted Miles, Interim President, Chief Financial Officer, and EVP of Corporate Development.
Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity to present the company to you. I think many have heard the story, but I look forward to giving you an update. We're a publicly traded company. Obviously, you need to read our risk factors before you invest. We're in the process of updating those along with our 10K, which we expect to release on Monday or Tuesday of next week. So the company, ACT, is really, we feel that we're on the leading edge of regenerative medicine, which of course at a conference like this, we've got a lot of company on the leading edge. But we really feel that we've been in human embryonic stem cell development for a long time. We've got a world-class team of biologists that have been generating really this engine of innovation. And now we're transitioning the company to be, rather than just expanding technology, really focusing on therapeutics and driving down to product development. So the key assets really in terms of product development are a phase 1 trial in dry AMD in the US and 2 phase 1 trials for Stargardt's, one in the US and one in Europe. The company's really in a turnaround mode. Those who are familiar with the story know that from many years ago there was some poor, really great science being hindered, I guess, by some bad business decisions. Current management is working, and over the past few years we've been working really hard to really unwind those decisions and just unhinge the company from the legacy issues. And I'm pleased to let you know that we're making tremendous progress in that regard, and we expect to be completely unhinged from that pretty soon. Our pipeline really sort of informs our strategy. It reflects our strategy. The lead assets, as I mentioned, are the dry AMD and SMD trials. Very soon, we're in the last stages of finalizing the paperwork, but we'll be starting a investigator-sponsored trial for MMD with UCLA in the next several weeks to month. That's the same cells that we're using for Stargardt's and for age-related macular degeneration applied to another macular degeneration disease, myopic macular degeneration. There's also, in the preclinical phase, there's a number of other ophthalmology applications where we're applying our expertise in stem cells to create photoreceptors and ganglion neurons and some corneal transplant solutions. Further down the pipeline, there's some non-ocular indications. As I mentioned, it's a tremendous kind of technology innovation at the company. And there's been a fair amount of work in the MSC landscape. We've gotten pretty far along in proof of concept, and we're going to start looking actively to partner that opportunity out pretty soon and keep us focused on ocular. So a little bit about the retina and about the structure of the eye overall. What we're talking about is in the back of the eye, there's a number of layers, the nerve fibers, the ganglion and bipolar neurons, the photoreceptors, and the RPE layer. What we're really dealing with is the RPE layer. It's a critical piece. It provides the life support for the photoreceptors. Without the RPE, the photoreceptors die, and there goes vision. They recycle vitamin A, they detoxify, they provide nutrients. They sit on top of the Brooks membrane, which is the line between the blood-ocular barrier, and it's what keeps the eye immune privileged. When the RPE layer fails, from a number of different reasons, it causes these macular degeneration diseases. I mentioned age-related macular degeneration as our lead indication along with Stargardt's. There's a lot of theories about what causes the death of the RPE layer. It's accumulated UV is the leading theory. Accumulated ultraviolet light in the back of the eye over 50 or 60 years of life starts to deteriorate these cells. Stargardt's is actually a juvenile onset of the same issue. The RPE layer dies, but it's because of a genetic predisposition. Myopic macular dystrophy, which I'll speak about in a moment, is the kind of the cracking and the breaking of the RPE layer because the eyeball's elongating. That's an enormous issue in Asian populations. So we think this is a tremendous way to apply our stem cell technology. We think it's a really great market for a number of reasons. It's attributable, or these attributes make it appealing and achievable for a small company, but the market's big enough that big companies are interested in pursuing it as well. Small dosage size. We're not injecting millions or billions of cells into the spine. We're injecting 200,000 cells into the back of the eye. Our current manufacturing facility in Marlborough, Mass. We could scale that up very quickly to make 50 to 100,000 doses a year. We're invested heavily in our manufacturing capability. I'll get into that a little bit in a moment. As I mentioned earlier, it's an immune-privileged site, so you don't have to deal with the rejection of these cells, and that makes one source for all people very achievable. In an abundance of caution in our trials, we're applying some immune suppressants, and that one of the questions we're going to tease out as we get into phase 2 is whether or not those are necessary. Ease of administration is a very common surgery. It's about 90 seconds of needle in the eye work, and then a few hours of outpatient resting and letting the cells settle, and then they're off out of the office. With the eye, you can see almost to the cellular level exactly what's happening. So we've been able to learn a tremendous amount from the trials and the patients that we've treated to date about what makes these things work or not work. And then, of course, it's a very large unmet medical need. AMD is approaching an epidemic status. It's a disease of aging. We all know we've got an aging population. With every decade of life after 40, the rate of prevalence increases exponentially. So you've really got this growth on growth issue. And The Lancet just published a paper a couple months ago that talks about globally this could be a 300 million person disease by 2040. We had always been looking at just the US and Europe. Just the 50 million by 2025 makes this an enormous unmet medical need, very big market opportunity. If you look at the treatment for wet AMD, the Lucentis and Eylea, those treatments combined are about $5 billion a year in sales. It's fairly commonly known that dry AMD is about 10 times more prevalent than wet AMD. So, I mentioned manufacturing. We've invested heavily in manufacturing. We've got the capability to develop these cells in a research setting. We've gone through the effort of transfer to manufacturing in a fully GMP manner. So we feel very confident of that. We've put very robust assays together to make sure that what's released is exactly what it should be. And as I said, we could scale the current facility very easily to a significant number of doses per year, much higher than the clinical trial demands currently. So about the clinical trial, when this first started in the clinic, there was a lot of skepticism, and the FDA would only allow us to treat very late-stage patients with almost no vision to lose. It started with 2,800, and based on safety profile and a continued clean safety profile, we were able to amend the protocol and get approval for treating better vision patients. So we look at that as a real nod by the FDA and acceptance of what we're doing. It also broadens the label and allows us to pursue a more aggressive strategy. So we're treating, and we're learning a lot from our phase 1 experience, treating very late-stage patients and then treating moderate-stage patients in that 20 to 100 vision range. Where we are with our phase 1, we're about 75% complete. We actually just treated a patient earlier this week, so it's 34 patients to date. Great deal of data that we've accumulated, and it's allowing us to really develop our early hypothesis, vet that with our world-class investigators that are working with us, and we plan on an FDA meeting in Q2 to further refine our strategy and start to really roll out the phase 2 program toward the end of the year. Our trial site, we're really fortunate to have such a great group of investigators involved in the trial. They're very highly engaged. These are some of the top eye hospitals in the world, and within each of these hospitals, we've got some of the top, most respected KOLs in the world participating in our trial. We get a lot of thought leadership and thought partnership from them. They're fully engaged. Dr. Schwartz at UCLA is the lead investigator, and he calls us as often as we call him with new ideas and just excitement about what he's seeing with his patients. I mentioned earlier the procedure. A vitrectomy is done 300,000 times a year in the US, over 1 million times globally. It's really, the delivery of our cells is really based on a vitrectomy. We feel it's going to be very easy to teach and scale on a broad basis to really migrate from those KOLs to all of the clinicians in the longer term. It also happens the reimbursement for this procedure is really favorable. So we think we'll get good adoption. I mentioned the expansion of our program, so we're expanding the RPE franchise into another indication. This is the myopic macular degeneration. We think we're seeing we like what we see in the first 2 trials, so we're investing further to expand the franchise into this other indication. I mentioned earlier it's a very big issue in Asian populations. We expect to start this trial pretty soon, and it'll be 12 patients, phase 1, and we'll continue to learn from what we see. Of course, IP is very important. Because we were one of the first companies using embryonic stem cells for research and for these purposes, we feel that we got a real big head start. We're very fortunate. We've got a former IP lawyer on staff at the company. He does other roles, but he is also a reformed IP lawyer. So he's taken a very hard look at this, very strategic approach to our IP. We feel that in many cases, not only do we have the technology platform covered very well, but also delivery, everything from the cells covered from the embryo all the way to the eyeball. So we continue to update and strengthen that position. So the other ocular programs, I'm only going to speak for a moment about these. They're very early, they're preclinical, but we're excited about some of the other things that we're seeing in the preclinical space. The ability to make photoreceptors and potentially corneal transplants. It's really unmet medical needs. The data are very early but encouraging, and more to come on that in the coming months. Going out of the eyeball down to the MSC program, we just had a press release a couple days ago about a paper that was published on some of the early work in our MSC program. What we believe our special sauce is our ability to manufacture these in a virtually inexhaustible way, and also the human embryonic stem cell MSCs are very potent. We think they're much more potent than bone marrow derived or other sources. The source of the study that was published recently was on lupus and uveitis. You can see in our animal studies, the lupus, the survival was extended significantly. And in the uveitis model, the inflammation was reduced significantly with our cells versus the others. So some corporate considerations I mentioned earlier, we're really in the midst of kind of rebuilding the company, unshackling ourselves from the past legacy issues, and we're making really good progress there. Rebuilding the management team. A recent addition is Dr. Eddie Anglade joined us as our EVP of Clinical Development. Tremendous experience in clinical development in ophthalmology. He's an ophthalmologist by training, so he relates very well with everybody. He really has taken a very good strategic view to how we can learn from our phase 1, migrate that into phase 2, and pick a very smart strategy. The board of directors is almost completely overhauled, and we get a tremendous amount of partnership from them as well, and very proud to have them on the board. So I have 1 minute and 30 seconds left. I can take questions if there are any. Okay. Thank you for your time.